Are you finding it hard to connect with your kids? Do you find that they connect with a screen or their friends more than they connect with you? Well, you're not alone. Many of us dads right now, especially with preteen kids, are finding it hard to connect with our kids in a meaningful, deep way. Or we feel overwhelmed by the parenting challenges of addressing behavior, smartphone use, or maybe the challenges of real nurturing and character development. Well, in this episode, I'm sitting down with Dan Peterson to find out how we can build strong character in our kids and how we can parent without punishment. Dan is a seasoned counselor and parent coach. And with over 30 years of experience working with children and families, Dan is going to share a unique approach to building stronger relationships and nurturing character development in your kids. So, whether you are a new parent or you are a seasoned parent, join this conversation and arm yourself with the knowledge and the tools to transform your parenting approach, because this valuable insight is going to help you make a lasting difference in the lives of your kids. This episode of the Dads Making a Difference podcast with Dan Peterson starts right now. Dan Peterson, welcome to the Dads Making a Difference podcast. Great to see you today.
Yeah, glad to be here. Looking forward to our talk.
Man, when we connected on our pre-call, you came to my attention through the recommendations of several other guys who have been on the podcast, Seth Studley, Larry Hagner, these guys in our community. And they're like, you got to have Dan on it. And so after we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, I was like, man, I can't wait to get into a conversation with you about what you do, the counseling you've done in the past, your background, and you share that with the guys in our community, because I think what you do is very powerful. So, Dan, why don't we start there? Why don't we start with a little bit of your background and why you're here today? We're going to talk about your coaching program, but give us a little bit of like, what was it like for Dan growing up?
Yeah, we might need a couple hours to go through this
Yeah.
one, but I always like to start just with like the way I grew up because it was like a training ground for the work that I do now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the oldest of six boys, and my parents, they got married when they were 19, probably because I was on the way. And by the time they were 32, they had six boys. So just a little context for that. I didn't have my first kid until I was 32.
Yeah,
My
same
my
here.
my parents got married at a very young age, and then probably for the I don't know first 12 or 15 years of my childhood, my mom was pregnant, breastfeeding, sleep deprived, trying to raise kids. My dad had his own construction company, so he's an entrepreneur trying to make all that meet work, and then try to provide. So I would say I was put in a position where I needed to help out a lot. And that took kind of the way that played itself out is I helped out a lot raising my brothers, like taking care of them, changing their diapers, babysitting, doing, a lot of chores. I, I would even go to the grocery store before school some days because we lived real close to a grocery store, and I'd buy groceries for like the family, and I'd write out a check with my mom's signature. And I was doing this like in middle school, and they all, like everybody that worked there, knew me.
Mm, yeah.
But just thinking about what kind of led to me feeling called to be a therapist that works with kids that are struggling, but also training and equipping parents. It's just I sensed that my parents deeply loved me. They cared for all of us as kids, but they just didn't have the models from their parents about how to raise kids, and then they were thrust into this. I just always felt like they were always trying to catch up and react, and didn't really have a whole lot of time to get trained and equipped. And that just made things a little bit more difficult for me than probably other kids my age.
Mm.
And at the same time, I feel like I have a lot of really good intuition as to what kids need, what parents need, and I just have a lot of compassion for them because anybody that's a parent, at least in my experience, they love their kid and they want what's best. Whether or not they have the tools and the framework to make that happen, who knows? Some of that's based on how they were raised. So that was kind of like what it was like for me growing up. As soon as I got out of high school, I went to college and found a psychology class. Once I took that, I was just really, really intrigued with psychology, human behavior, and then kind of got into child development. Then started working at therapeutic and alternative schools for kids with emotional and behavioral problems. And I've been doing that on and off for about 30 years. And yeah, I have a real heart for kids that are struggling, and have found that if I can get the parents in front of me and give them the right frameworks and tools, and they get to be the hero of the story and helping their kid, as opposed to putting their kid on medicine, putting their kid in therapy, that we can get results a lot faster, a lot quicker, a lot more sustainable, and the family as a unit is healing and strengthening at the same time.
Man, I gotta share with you. I'm gonna do like the number one rule of podcasting not to do's. Like everybody says, don't do this when you have a guest. But sometimes a guest comes on and what they share in the first couple minutes of their upbringing strikes home with you. And
Mm-hmm.
and man, I knew by and I said this before we started recording. I love the picture in the background right now of your family with your arms around yourself, looking out at the water, at the
Yeah.
mountains in the background, because we have something similar in our home. And um, man, my parents had me 19, 20 years old,
Oh, wow.
uh, oldest of two of three, not six. But then I also didn't have my first child. I was 31, turning 32. And
Wow.
I just saw a lot of what you shared. My mom was at home. She would do some day home stuff to make my dad was in construction. My dad is still
Oh,
working
wow.
in construction. And so
Nice.
like you're telling your story, I'm like, oh my goodness. Like the people who know me and know my story listening to this will be like, Cam, he planned this. And I did like I didn't know all of that before you came on. So thank you for sharing. And
Yeah.
then I got into education. And I love what you said about you found that you had a heart for kids, a heart for kids who maybe had a little bit of a different upbringing. And I'd love to start there because I
Mm-hmm.
shared with you some of my context. I'm a vice principal of a high school, worked in elementary, middle, and high. I have a heart for kids. I love kids, but I see that broken kids come into our building every day and hurt people. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of parents and families out there who don't have the skills or don't know where to find those skills. So I'd like to
Right.
start there. When you were working in schools and you were in these elementary, middle schools, you're just watching these kids. What are some of the kind of telltale signs you saw in kids that you're like, I need to connect with this kid? This is a kid who
Yeah.
my heart is drawn to.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you answering that question, because I don't often talk about this, but when I was growing up, I was really popular. I was pretty athletic. Ended up playing college basketball, but was really good in sports, had friends, but so like on the outside, it looked like I was really well adjusted and really comfortable in my own skin, but inside, like I just lacked a lot of confidence and felt awkward or different. And there's a lot of reasons why we don't need to get into today, but I can sense that in a kid almost immediately. So I can go in a classroom and there can be 30 kids in there, and within a minute or two, I can just the kids that are on the outside looking in, or that are struggling to connect socially, or they're just dealing with, I can just sense that almost immediately. And what that looks like for me is maybe they're just copying what the other kids are doing,
Mm-hmm.
or they're acting goofy or silly, trying to, get the attention of others, or they're just quiet and they're by themselves and they're observing. Sometimes the kids are, picking their fingernails and rocking and constantly moving, trying to manage like some uncomfortable emotion they have. Or on the other end of the spectrum, they're just like treating everybody like crap,
Mm-hmm.
disrespectful, they're antagonizing, they're bullying people. When I observe that, my brain doesn't go to what's wrong with this kid. Let's try to discipline them into, you know, good character, evidence-based behavior. It's more of where's their heart and what can I
Mm-hmm.
do to connect with them and see them. And then as I develop a rapport and relationship with them, how can I help provide what they're needing, what tools, what type of support they're looking for? That's just how my brain works. I'm really not big on how do we get this behavior to stop? I just get
Yeah.
really curious about what's fueling that.
Right. The mechanism of like what's causing this.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think about the kids who walk through the hallways of schools all over North America who go under, quote unquote, go under the radar. They
Mhm.
walk through, and because they aren't making a big scene, maybe they aren't using inappropriate language or having
Mhm.
disruptive behaviors, and how they just go under the radar, but you see they're very like drawn in, they're
Yeah.
quiet. They just go along with the flow because it's easy, because the
Yeah.
system doesn't fit them and they don't feel like they belong, and they're
Right.
just uncomfortable in their own skin. I've seen that. So I know exactly what you're saying. This you said copying, goofy, silly, quiet, observing things like they're biting their fingernails, these little like ticks and things that they might have,
Mhm.
and you see them and you're like, okay, I'm curious about what's happening here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love what you were saying about not fixing, quote unquote, the behavior, fixing the behavior, addressing it, don't do this, compliance and
Mhm.
punishment is that real strength based versus deficit based approach.
Sure.
And I think a lot of parents who struggle with kids who might be in that area because they deal with it every day. They're at home. I deal with this every day. I see this every day from my son. Like, you need to do this. You need to have rules and consequences. They come often from a deficit base because they're just immersed in it.
Yeah.
So when you're speaking with parents and you've seen these kids, and you're making connections, how do you reframe a conversation with a family or with parents to be more strength based, even when it's hard?
Yeah. So, I mean, I can answer this a few different ways, but the might be helpful just to back up a little bit. And
Hmm.
I'm going to share with you that I've been in this field about 30 years. Probably 15 years into this, I was so burned out and fried that I was ready to quit. In
Mm.
fact, I had a job lined up as a financial planner,
Oh, wow.
which is pretty much the opposite of kids that are struggling or
That's a
adults with
180.
cash.
Yeah.
And part of my frustration was the system or the set of tools, the training, for people in schools or for therapists is what is the problem? How do we get the problem to stop?
Hmm.
And when the tools we currently have aren't working, then we turn to medication or we turn to the mental health system. And really what was not sitting well with me is like where's the gifts, where's the greatness in these kids, where's their skill, how do we see them and help them see themselves as valuable first,
Hmm.
and what can we be doing as adults and as a system to help build these kids up on the inside rather than putting labels and diagnosis on them. That really just comes from a place of the adults not knowing what to do, so they're trying to
Yep.
medicate the symptoms as opposed to treating the root of it,
Mm.
which is like my lens and my framework for how I work with teachers and parents now is um, I use this model. It's called the nurtured heart approach, but it's how do we build the kid up on the inside? How do we use our relationship to see and communicate and lift them up so they start to see and feel and believe differently about who they are? Because if that's not happening, if a kid doesn't believe they're loved, they're valuable, they're competent, they're kind, they're respectful, like good luck trying to get behavior to improve.
Hmm.
Right. So we need to do that. The other thing we need to do is how do we stop participating in the drama, the problems, the power struggles, all that negativity? And then the third part is how do we discipline in a way that teaches skills and ownership as opposed to you need to pay for having problems? This idea of punishing kids when they make mistakes, it communicates that you're bad. There's something wrong with you. It
Right.
induces shame. And I'm just really big. Everybody makes mistakes. It's a sign that you don't have a skill yet.
Right.
Let's just practice that, learn from it, and move forward. And that's the leveling up. So, the framework that I use through this model is it's like a tripod. You have to have all three of those working in unison to have an internal change, and then a result of that having a transformation in behavior. And when I used to work in the schools, it was always I'm called into these rooms when the kids are in crisis, or go and observe this kid for 45 minutes and make a checklist how many times they're off task. You're just training people to pay attention to the problems, and that never really produced sustainable change for me.
Right. It's one of the hardest things that I've observed. I worked in special education here for 7.5 years, and it was like you get this form, they call it the ABAS, and you just like,
Yeah.
yeah, and you're just like, check all these behaviors. Are they doing this? Well, to your best of knowledge, how do they interact with others? And well, this has nothing to do with the child. This has
Right.
everything to do with the perception of the adult. So let's
Yeah.
shift our conversation about connecting with this kid, and everything that you just shared is rooted in relationship.
Yeah.
And when you root things in relationship and you're caring for that human being, then we can start to address, like, how do we help build the skills, like
Yeah.
shift the environment, the way that we're speaking as adults, how we're not we're not mimicking their behavior, but we're modeling behavior. Like,
Right.
there's so much here. Um, so there's people, there's guys listening to this right now who, might be saying, my son is struggling right now. My daughter is struggling right now in school, and I don't know what to do. And at home, maybe they're between like 8 and 12. And this is a really formative time in their experience.
Yeah.
So if someone is struggling right now and they're struggling to see the benefits, they're struggling to see the strengths right now because they're just immersed, where can they start? What types of things to look for? What's an approach they can take, just to start getting back and recentering on, I love that you said nurtured heart approach,
Yeah.
on the heart of that child.
Right. So a couple of things. One is, if you're struggling to connect or struggling to get through to your kid and you're feeling angst about that, that's actually really good. That means you deeply love and care for your kid. If
Hmm.
you didn't deeply love and care, you wouldn't care.
Yeah.
You would
Yeah.
be bothered by that. And unfortunately, what happens is when the tools you currently have aren't working and your kid isn't getting better and you're starting to feel angst, you actually double down on the tools you're using that you already know don't work. And that's where parents or teachers start to go down this road of, we need to get strict. We need to come up with discipline. We need to be more firm, or what rewards are going to motivate this kid to behave.
Hmm.
And I've just found that that's not super effective, especially for the kids that are chronically struggling. And so, place that I like to start with is, how do you use your relationship as the reinforcement? How do you use your relationship as a way to see your kid differently and help them experience their own success and their own value? And from there, you're going to start to see a change and shift. And one of the ways we go about doing that is, and this is where I start with parents and with teachers, is I identify like 5 to 10 character qualities or values that are really important to you, that you would like to see your kids have. And most of the time when I ask that, people come up with a variety, but one of the common ones is respect. I really wish my kid was more respectful. So here's what happens. And can I ask you this just out of your own experience?
Of course. Yeah.
What typically prompts you to have a conversation with your kids about respect? What kind of triggers or initiates those conversations?
Yeah. Typically a conversation about respect, both with my own kids and with the kids I talk to on a day-to-day basis, typically comes out of a lens of compliance, because something has happened, or they've broken a rule, or they've
Yeah,
been disrespectful. So now we're having a
yeah,
conversation about what it means to be respectful, which is often like drawing attention to the behavior and the outcome of the behavior, not the origin of it.
yeah. So when I ask that question, and I've been kind of using this approach and this model for close to 15 years, 100% of the time, and there has been no exceptions, that's the exact same response everybody gives.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about respect when the kid's been disrespectful.
Right.
That's what's kind of prompted or initiating. And that's the model that schools will teach, that parenting experts will give. That's kind
Mm-hmm.
of what was modeled to me. That's actually, however, how open are kids to your words of wisdom about the importance of being respectful when they're being confronted for being disrespectful?
Yeah. Not
Generally,
open.
it's really low. Yeah. And they're not open. It's not the optimal time for learning because they're being confronted with failure.
Mhm.
And that's when your natural defensiveness goes up, and you'll hear it's well, it's his fault, or the teacher wasn't listening, or they started it, or it's an excuse.
Right.
So the time to teach respect is when you actually have evidence of them demonstrating respect in the moment.
Mm.
So you want to confront and provide tons and tons of evidence and proof that your kids are respectful. And the way you go about doing that is like, hey, see that you're really angry right now, but you're not yelling. That shows respect. Or, You are in your seat, you got your book out, you got your pen out. That's being respectful. You're not interrupting the teacher. Or at home, your mom told you to go do that, you did it right away. That's being respectful. You're just giving real time specific feedback
Yeah.
when you see that quality, as opposed to giving the feedback in the lessons when the quality's been violated. And
Yep.
what's really interesting is when you use your relationship to connect to them on their success, and you're providing proof and evidence that this is truly who you are. The kids are getting that connection from you. They're getting built up on the inside, and then they hear that over and over again. They start to believe that they're respectful. Well,
Hmm.
what happens when kids believe they're respectful? They start to behave in a way that's congruent with that.
Yep.
Right. So that's always the
Yep.
foundation and the starting point is, how do I train myself to see evidence of these qualities in you, and start to provide a case to prove to you that this is who you are.
Yep.
And instead of what do you get when you behave well, or what happens to you when you misbehave. You're getting to the heart and the root of the kid. And then the cool thing about this is you're starting to download a moral compass.
Yep.
You're creating a value driven kid that's doing the right thing because that's who they are, not because of fear of what's going to happen if I violate this.
It's amazing. And even this is like a personal reflection as you're sharing.
Yeah.
I find it very easy in my office as vice principal of the school when a kid is navigating a complex situation or something has happened that would be quote unquote disrespectful, or they come into my office and I work with now, I'm in a high school 9 through 12 and grade 9 through 12. So we're talking like 15 to 18-year-olds. And they might come in my office and they're swearing and whatever. And I'm just like, let them settle. I'm like, how are you? And I found that in the
Mhm.
last 5 years of being in this position, that question of how are you to stop takes the edge off right away a little bit. And I can do
Yeah.
that really well with kids in my office. And I don't take it as disrespect. I know they're in an emotional spot. So I'm like, how are you? What's going on? How can I help? What
Yeah.
do we need? And then you can come back to like, hey, what was going on about 15 minutes ago? Tell me more about that. How do we,
Right.
avoid that? So I can do that really well at school. When I get home with my son, there's times I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, and and I don't know if it's because I've just like over peopled all day, and then I come home and my patience is a little low. But I find as parents, so many parents will do that at, at work or with colleagues or whatever have you. They'll be like,
Hmm.
hey, I don't want to have an argument with you. Like, let's have a conversation. How are you? What have I done? Tell me more about how I've hurt you. Like that type of stuff. And then they'll get
Yeah.
home with their kids and be like, what are you doing? You're being disrespectful.
That's so funny. I used to tell my wife this is like, I work with kids that are defiant all day long. When I come home, if my kids don't like listen to me or they challenge me, I'm
Yeah.
like, I've been dealing with this all day. I don't need any more of this. But I have a theory on why that is. And that theory is, the part of our brain, our fight or flight, our amygdala, it's constantly scanning for danger and problems.
Mhm.
And when you're in a position where you have children and you love them and you desperately desire for them to be full of character and have a good moral compass, when you see them violating that, that part of your brain actually turns on and it drives you to try to get it to stop.
Mm.
Your brain can't really discern and differentiate between real and perceived danger or physical and emotional. And when kids are being disrespectful, and you're the parent, like you're compelled to discipline or to address it. It's coming from a place of love and it's coming from a place of care, but your timing is off.
Mhm.
So the reason why parents have a harder time doing that with their own kids as opposed to in their professional or their social life, it's because there isn't as much investment in that person, and you're not getting activated and concerned when they're being defiant, disrespectful, or behaving in a way that's incongruent with your values.
Yeah. It's a good point. I have to think about that. Like, I have to think about like, what is it in this moment that's making me not respond, but react
Yeah,
this way? Yeah. Of
yeah. For me, is it okay if I share just like an example
course.
for me?
Yeah.
So, what I found is one of my triggers, or one of the things that gets me activated and worked up real quickly in my home, is especially when my boys complain when I ask them or tell them to help out or get their chores done or their responsibilities. So whenever I can feel my blood pressure going up when they start to whine and complain and challenge me on that. And what I've realized when I like really think about that is part of my values is we're a team. We help out.
Mm-hmm.
We're grateful. We're hardworking. And when my kids whine and complain, it violates all of those values. So like not only does it violate the values that I hold important to me, but it's these kids are a reflection of me. Of course I'm going to be activated and frustrated. It's my fault. It's my problem. Like that's
Yeah.
the danger or the slippery slope that I get on. And if I don't have awareness of it, it's very hard not to react and respond. But when I'm like tuned into that and I have a set of strategies on what to do instead, much, much more effective.
Yeah. As a dad, it's really easy to be like, where did you learn this? I didn't teach you this way. I didn't bring you up this way. Of course. Like,
As I'm losing my patience and yelling at my kids.
yeah. It's like,
Yeah, it's so funny.
it's the old like kid. I have a 9-year-old son, a 12-year-old daughter. And so they'll be yelling at each other in the basement. And I'll yell from upstairs, stop yelling at each other. And I'll just
Yeah.
like put my hands on my head and be like, what did I just do? Like talk about reinforcement and not the
Yeah,
good
right.
kind. Yeah.
Hmm.
So
That's good.
So let's talk more about the work that you do, like specifically about Compass for Life. Tell me about the program. Why did you shift from working in schools specifically to going out and being like, I've been working with kids, and you mentioned this at the very beginning. I've been working with kids, but I'm noticing something about the adults and the families here. Why did you make that
Yeah.
shift?
Two reasons. One is I was just noticing that, in the context of providing treatment for kids, to
Mhm.
get change, it takes a really long time. And part of that is because, especially kids that are younger, they just don't have the cognitive and the emotional maturity to benefit from talk therapy, learn tools, and then go implement it in a different setting. They're very environment dependent. So if they go into an environment it's chaotic and it's stressful, good luck in implementing the tools that you learned from a therapist 4 days ago in a completely different environment.
Yeah.
The other thing is I noticed that what we do as mental health professionals is if we don't know what to do and the kids aren't improving, we go to medication or we go to diagnosis. And I was just seeing that happening like it was just becoming more and more prevalent. I'm like, I don't think this kid's on medicine. He's not any different.
Yeah.
Or now he's got all these side effects. And really what's happening is these parents are in a place where they're helpless and they're dependent upon a professional to fix their kid. And something about that just didn't sit right with me. Like if I do therapy with a kid and they start to improve, like who gets the credit for that? Was it my wisdom and my set of tools? Was it the kid's openness and willingness? Like who knows?
Mhm.
So what I found is that the people that have the most impact are usually the least trained. The people that have the most impact are the parents.
Yeah.
And I just kept it's interesting. This really became apparent to me when I became a parent that I would go home and I'd love spending time with my boy, but then I go to work and just see parents in misery and desperate saying help. And I didn't know what to tell them. So I came across this approach. It's called Nurtured Heart. It gave me a real clear method and a framework on how to help change kids from the inside out. And then I think God was speaking to me honestly. He just said, you're going to shift gears here and you're going to really train and equip parents to be the expert, give them a set of tools that they can align with their values. And then they're going to know exactly what to do in the environment where the kid spends most of the time. And through that, you're going to get the same results in a much faster, much more sustainable way. The parent gets the credit, parent-child relationships improved. The parental, like husband and wife, that relationship's better because they're not butting heads on all the problems now.
Yeah.
And it's just a much more healthy healing modality than therapy. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with medicine or therapy. I just feel like that should be like third or fourth.
Right.
And the place to start with is giving the people that have the most impact the right tools and the right framework.
Yeah, I love it. And listening to what you're just sharing, and of course that makes sense. Hey,
Yeah.
there's no one listening to this right now who's like, I don't know about that. Empowering parents to build better connections with their kids. I don't know about this, Dan. Like
Yeah.
everyone listening to this right now, whether they're struggling or not, is like, no, that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
if we shift the home, we shift the family, we shift the connection, all of it. But it's so hard. It's so like it's so hard for people to wrap around that that's the best step to take, and they go to medications, compliance, punishment because I feel that it's the easy way out.
Yeah.
And it's
Well, and
not. It's not easy.
it's the one that's the most recommended and the most accepted.
Yeah.
And I think one of the other obstacles parents have to like getting parent coaching as opposed to treatment, not only are the people that are supposed to know what to do are
Hmm.
telling them put your kids in therapy or put them on medicine. But when you're in a place of power, authority, responsibility for another human being, like the parent is, and your kid's struggling, you don't know what to do and the tools you have, that's a very dangerous place to be because I should know what to do. And so the fact that I don't, like, there's some shame and judgment, and like, I don't want to reveal that to anybody. So, when the way that I kind of coach around that is I said, well, this isn't your fault. This isn't about blame. It's the tools that you have for your specific kid are just the wrong tools.
Yeah.
So let's blame the tools and give you a new set that's actually going to work. And
Hmm.
parents are like, well, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I'd rather do that.
Yeah, blame the tools. I like it that you say that because
Yeah.
I've had conversations with families who kids are struggling with stuff, and uh, all of a sudden they'll start coming up with, yeah, well, I was the same way when I was a kid, or I struggled with this when I was a kid, and they're not dismissing what's happening, but it just points to the wrong tools.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question because I'm seeing more and more of this in my line of work and in my conversations with families. How much does I'm going to drop this word, we might go on a tangent, but how much does like trauma in the adult's life impact their ability to develop the tools to support their kids?
Hmm. Yeah, we could go down a rabbit hole here. I think it depends on the degree of the trauma and whether or not you're aware of it and you got help for it. Because a
Hmm.
lot of times when parents that have trauma, especially if it's trauma based on their childhood that was
Hmm.
inflicted by their parents, when their kids start to act out or challenge them, it triggers and activates their history. And so
Yeah.
now they're not responding as a parent, they're responding as a traumatized child. And then there's this pull of trying to get the kids to stop to self-soothe themselves. So if my kid's being defiant and challenging, or maybe they're aggressive or they're disrespectful, and the parents trying to get it to stop and they're not, and then the kid gets even more demanding. Now they're in this place of I feel helpless. I'm not being heard. I'm not being seen. I'm not being respected. I'm not being loved. That's really difficult. If you don't have awareness and you don't have some healing around that,
Hmm.
to not see this as my kid just needs boundaries and he needs accountability. He
Right.
doesn't need me to be calm and peaceful and give in,
Yeah.
because that's just going to keep it. But yeah, there's more and more adults walking around with trauma,
Hmm.
and trauma's on a huge spectrum. There's micro
Yes.
trauma, there's
Yeah.
huge trauma, but one of the things that I've found is that inconsistent parenting and unpredictable parenting is traumatic for children because
Mm.
it's very hard to predict what type of parent you're going to get today. And if I can't predict and rely, then I'm in this hyper vigilant mode, always guessing. And if that happens chronically, you start to develop a lot of anxiety and stress, and it's really hard to relax. That's kind of the definition of trauma.
I appreciate you answering that. It's been on my brain a lot the last 2 weeks, just through some situations that we're navigating. And I was like, when I get Dan on, I just want to ask him this because he talks to so many families and in a different
Yeah.
context than I do. Thank you. Uh, Dan, what have you learned over the last, the world's changed in the last 4 years. We know this. So much has happened, but over the last like 4 to 5 years, What are some things that have stood out to you in your interactions with families and parents? What have you learned, and what's sticking with you right now that you would encourage people who are listening to this to focus on?
Hmm.
That's a lot of questions. I apologize.
Yeah, no, it's good. I want to be thoughtful about my answer, not just say the right thing. But so I have three kids, 12, 14, and 17. My 12-year-old, he's uh he's a highly anxious kid. He's always struggled with anxiety. And I've just noticed that there's a whole lot more kids struggling with anxiety, struggling with school anxiety, social anxiety. And, when you're a kid and you're hearing for 2 straight years that if you catch this virus, some of you could die, you could get sick, you could actually
Mm,
transmit it to your grandmother, she could die. We can't go to schools, it's not safe. Like, how in the world can a kid make sense of that and not be super worried and anxious?
right.
And then you miss out on all this face-to-face social time with your friends, and you're not in the school environment, it's not safe. So I'm just seeing a lot more kids being unsure of themselves, being socially awkward, being anxious about different environments. And for my son that already kind of struggles with that, it's been really, really difficult to see him have like a more difficult time with things that should be super easy for him.
Mm,
And then, like, parents and teachers, what do they do if you have a highly anxious kid that's worried about everything all the time? They can't learn. You're not going to be
right.
effective at learning if your
Nope.
brain's highly anxious, if you're uncomfortable in your own skin.
Seen lots of it,
Yeah,
seen lots of it in, and it can be debilitating for kids. And in a way, not that when I say debilitating, I mean that anxiety that builds up that adults may not understand, they may not interpret it, they may not see it, but it's there. And that kid, again, is closed in the space, shriveled, like, or over the top because they're so uncomfortable, they just need to make something happen.
right.
And you can't learn. You can't learn, you can't engage, you can't build friendships, you can't build relationships, you don't find connection, purpose, belonging.
Yeah.
All of that comes from that. Oh man.
Yeah, I think that word you've said it several times, and it's really the foundation of what I focus on is connection, human
Mm,
connection. And when you're not connected and you're not having enough connection and you're getting the connection through a screen,
mm-hmm.
there's a lot of like trickle down side effects of that. I think kids have replaced face-to-face time, or some of their face-to-face time, and their physical activity time is playing games online with your friends because it's just easier.
Yeah.
Um, you can't, like, there's a whole lot of different physiological and neurological things that are happening when you're face-to-face with someone versus looking at them through a camera.
If you were to give some quick hits, some like a couple tips to some guys listening to right now, just to start that relationship building in the home, some things to look out for, what would they be?
Yeah, I would say write down your top 5 character qualities that are important to you as a dad
Mhm.
or a mom if we have moms listening. And set a goal for yourself every day to point out to your kid at least 5 times when you see them showing that quality. There's just a couple cool things that happen when you start to increase the frequency of this happening is number one, you're intentionally looking for ways to connect to your kid, which the way that they receive that is I must be valuable because I'm worth your time and attention. And the message you're sending is this is who you are. These are the qualities that you have, and here's the proof. So kids start to become aware of their success and they start to believe differently. The other thing is like the payoff for the parent is you're training your mind to be on the lookout for the things that are going to bring you pride and joy and love and confidence. Like when my kids are being respectful and kind, like I enjoy that. Why not
Yeah.
spend more time and connection cultivating that versus trying to get the problems to stop?
Love it. Right.
Yeah.
You got three of your own. As a dad right now, what is an area of growth or learning that you're excited about diving into?
Yeah. Having 12, 14, 17, they're busier, they're more interested in friends. Like that social life is becoming a huge priority, which is really difficult for me at times because I thoroughly enjoy spending quality time with my kids. When they were younger, like that was super easy. You'd walk through
Yeah.
the door and it'd be like, President just showed up, let's play.
Yeah.
So one thing that I've been practicing is being on the lookout for bids for my attention that are rarely going to be at a time that's convenient for me. So I've just been getting really good at saying yes. And it's
Mm.
not yes to dad, give me this. It's dad, can you take me to this? My daughter, can you take me to the store to get some makeup? Or can you take me over to my friend's house? Or can you take me to the volleyball court? Or, you know what? I forgot this. Can you come bring it up? Like I've spent hours and hours and hours with my daughter in the car just by saying yes to those things.
Mm. I love it.
Um, my 17-year-old, he wants to play ping pong and he never wants to play when I have energy or time. It's usually at
Of
10:30
course.
at night when he gets home and I'm trying to go to bed.
Yeah. And he's fired up. He's like, let's go. It's a perfect time.
Yeah, he's like, man, the night is young. I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, I've been falling asleep for the last hour. So finding ways to connect with your kids as they get older by saying yes to the things that they want to do with you, and just using that as the opportunity to have that one-on-one time. The other thing that I like to do is instead of trying to come up with things that I invite them to do with me, I give them a list once a quarter. What are like 4 or 5 things you'd like to do one-on-one with me?
Ah,
And then what are 2 or 3 things you'd like to do? I'll skip work, we'll play hooky, I'll pull you out of school, and we'll just go do together. And what's cool about that is number one, every kid wants to play hooky. So they get to decide what we do. It's on their terms, it's their ideas. So I don't have to try to convince them to do it with me. I just have to say yes to them and
yeah.
then book time on the calendar.
I love it. So
Yeah.
good. Couple couple things there that I definitely I'm gonna pay more attention to. I like the bids for your attention. I'm noticing that now more with my kids is these subtle things. And with my daughter right now, it's like, Dad, will you drive me to school or should I get a ride? I'm like, I'll drive you.
Yes.
I know in my head it's probably gonna make me about 10 minutes later than I should be, or if it, but yes,
Hmm.
I'll drive you to school for sure. You know, and
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's those times. So thank you for sharing. Dan, I want to thank you for being here and taking time away from your family. If there's guys listening to this right now, um, guys or gals listening to this right now, and they want to learn more about what you do and connect with you, where can they do that?
Yeah. Two places. One, my website is like there's a lot of resources. I have a lot of videos, and um, if you're interested in anything I've been talking about and you think it might be helpful, just go to my website, fill out the contact form. I'll reach back out to you directly, and we can just have a conversation. I also have some like free resources if you sign up to be on my email list. I got some ebooks that I wrote that are just resources, and then I always send out parenting tips. And then the other thing is just on my Facebook page. I've been more and more active on there, giving parenting tips and ideas. And I've been creating a lot of videos just with me and my kids spending time together
Yeah.
that are kind of good lessons and good strategies that parents can use. So those are probably the two best ways.
Excellent. And so it's thecompassforlife.com.
Yeah. And it's the number four. So the
Number four.
compass for life.com.
Excellent.
And so and my link to my Facebook page and all that's on my website as well.
Perfect. Dan, thank you. I appreciate you. Appreciate the conversation.
Yeah. It's been can't believe we're up already. I feel like we just got started, but that usually means we drive well and it's a good conversation. So appreciate the opportunity.